Thank you so much for staying tuned to this channel. Welcome to yet another edition of Africa Discourse. I am Wilson Marshall. Today, it is all about conflicts in Africa, the impact of weapons racketeering. If you talk about Libya, they have their own problems. We talk about insurgents. They are trying to balance up the government, but still you get to discover that we have large culture of light weapons, even heavy weapons are there. You go to Central African Republic where you have conflicts. Wow, the story is like almost the same. You go to Mali, go to Guinea, Nigeria, you just name it, already have this kind of sparks of kind of conflict or insurgents or agitators. You get to see different types of arms. Some are well prepared that some of these rebels, they have what they call those kind of weapons that can bring down planes. Yeah. How did they get into the country? Talking about this weaponry, talking about these arms and ammunition. How did they get into Africa? If you take a look at the report, you're going to hear a connection to China supplying arms to African countries, a connection to Russia supplying arms to African countries. Even in some African countries, they manufacture these arms locally. Some also tell you mercenaries from the US. This is French made, Russian made, Italian made, all in Africa. Come on. Is Africa now a market for weapons? All these and more will take a look at today's installment of Africa Discourse. With me here in the studio, I have a Reverend gentleman, political analyst. Join me to welcome Reverend Humphrey Arega. Reverend, welcome to Africa Discourse.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
It's been like how many months now? Happy New Month to you, Reverend. All right. And of course, you've seen him already. He is a vibrant lecturer, a reverend gentleman also, and a political analyst. Join me to welcome Honorable Frank Amego. Welcome to Africa Discourse.
Thank you so very much. Can we extend the
Of course, the handshake should be extended. Yeah, Happy New Month.
By Bluetooth.
So that they get a chain reaction. So if I use like 3 weeks or thereabouts. Anyway, it's okay. People are like getting so worried. Some are cashing in on what is happening in Africa as a continent. You get to hear about military coup. You get to hear about separatists. You get to hear about agitators. All these cannot just take place without them being armed. You get to see that sponsors trying to racketeer weapons into each country. But like asking, we thought that you guys were just a small group agitating for a better nation. How come you are disarmed to the teeth? According to records, millions of light and, of course, heavy arms, they are here in Africa, both legally and illegally. Reverend, let me start off from you. What do you feel about this?
Well, it's a very worrisome issue. Worrisome in the sense that we are killing each other. And we are trying to ask ourselves, what is the end point of your killing? You cannot manage the dead man, you can only manage the living. But let us also look at the understanding of how this issue of conflicts and armed proliferation has come around. It also has to do with the external influence, the balkanization of Africa by major world powers, and those contentions have not died. Then, of course, we talk about the fact that the African, I keep saying that part of the problems of the African society is the kind of traditional way we've come up. The African tradition believes in these old traditional affairs of povas and kings, and these were warriors. Warriors in the sense that they conquer and they subjugate their subjects. And so some of our so-called democratic leaders have not purged themselves of this kind of attitude. Because where there is no knowledge, brute force becomes the way forward. And that's what we're seeing. Most of the African so-called leaders do not have an agenda, do not have a clear-cut distinction of how things should work. And then Africa is the deposit of mineral resources in the world. And those who are African, what you might call overlords of the outside world, understands that for them to survive in their own countries, their own continents, they need the resources of Africa. And so they try to use African against African so that they can get the raw material resources on a much cheaper level, because they supply the weapons. Weapons are not manufactured in Africa. Most of them, but 90-something% of the weapons are not manufactured in Africa. They are imported into it. And so that shows to you that it is vested interest of somebody outside who has a within connection, just like slave trade. The overlord masters worked with some of our traditional rulers to take their citizens as slaves in exchange of either a piece of tobacco or a bottle of wine or some things that they say are not seen before. That has only escalated to some things. Now you also find that most of the resources, even here, they also transferred to these same countries because they do not have what to do with it here. They don't understand what it is. And so until and unless we ask ourselves, how and why do we exist? And how do we manage ourselves like other nations that we are trying to look up to while we are trying to educate ourselves?
All right. Thank you so much for giving a foundation to this discussion. Honorable Frank Amego, you heard a submission. You get to hear about Tucano jets. Some country will just go get it legally, while some rebels will go get that same jet. Some will get, a cruise missile. Some will go and get a rocket launcher. As they're supplying to the government of the country, they're giving it also to the rebels. I mean, how can you really put this together, Honorable?
Yes, the challenge Africa is having is a sort of continental inferiority complex. As Reverend stated it, they are taking advantage of our bad leadership. There is no way any country outside Africa want to invade our territory without the beckoning onto them by the African leadership. So what I see there is things led to the conflicts. And after we have resolved what led to the conflicts, we don't want to solve the conflict itself. We can talk about the weapon racketeering. But what the the EU, African Union, tried to do was trying to look at the effects of conflicts and arms, small arms and light weapons inflow into Africa. That's what they came up with, silencing the guns 2020. That thing, though it worked a little bit, but for the past 2 decades, Liberia, Sierra Leone, and 2 other countries like that, they were able to get good results to silence the guns. But the AU didn't find out the remote and maybe the immediate causes of these conflicts. Conflicts emerged before they started importing guns. And what is common with Africa, they are so obvious that such things may not happen in other continents of the world. Poverty. The moment the leadership has refused to attend to poverty, people go to look inwards, negatively or positively. There's poverty, there is historical inequalities or injustices. People can think backwards and say, at a time like this, as you mentioned slavery not quite long, there was historical injustices. So this is time for us to fight back. Apart from that, you have inequality. Just in Nigeria, the north and south. A time will come, the southerners will raise up their heads, we don't want. Later, the north will rise up to say, no, we don't want what you are doing. So there are palpable inequalities. There's unemployment. Unemployment may be possible in other continents, but the way it is in Africa, these are things that led to conflicts. Among that, as is also common to other countries of the world, climate change. If there's erosion now, of course, it's a common thing in Nigeria and other parts of Africa. The government makes little or no effort towards arresting that devastation of the flood or climate change. Illegal financial flows.
Illegal financial flows.
We observed some days ago. I thought when I saw the headlines on newspapers littered everywhere that the government of Nigeria want to sell some assets that were initially traceable to a particular woman, a former minister of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. When I saw one other item, BRA, I thought it was an acronym. Okay, let me just read to know what's BRA. Little did I know that was ordinary bra. And when they did the costing in pounds and in dollars, I'm sure journalists didn't want to bother writing a long sheet of paper to put in naira. It would have been very long. So the illegal financial flow, people are seeing it. They are seeing the people that are involved in them. There's corruption. These are the things the AU should look at first towards arresting conflict. Things led to it. Not until and unless EU will pragmatically face these things that led to conflicts in Africa. Otherwise, they'll just be rubbing the surface.
All right, they'll be rubbing the surface.
Yes.
Now, he talked about silencing the gun. He said it worked a little bit, but right now it's like most countries that are involved in racketeering of weapons have jettisoned that aspect of AU that says silence the gun. What's the reason behind it?
Well, you know, sometimes it's easier to pontificate over issues than to look at the nitty-gritties of it. Most of the time, those who try to discuss it are the perpetrators of the crime. And that's why it is not easy to get to the bottom of any problem, because for any African leader you see today, they were put there by militants and by armed gangs who help in making sure that the elections are not held properly or they're not held at all, but they are giving the vote to them. So you cannot now begin to say what you did was wrong. But I think he mentioned something which I've always talked about and tried to refer to when talking about poverty. Is also something that we have used, nations have used against Africa, and we have used against ourselves. We're talking about poverty. And when we talk about poverty, maybe we're talking about the economic poverty of persons. But I've always believed that the greatest poverty that we've had in Africa is the mental poverty, is the knowledge poverty. And that's why the African leaders are not very concerned about the development of the mind of the average African. Because once you have a developed society, it is difficult for you to trample upon their rights and their privileges. Most Africans do not even know their rights. And so it is easier for Africans who have been popularized to be given a fraction of something to just ease them. You give a young man, for instance, a bottle of drink and a packet of cigarettes. He's ready to carry a gun to fight on your behalf. Because for that one moment, he feels that he has been satisfied. But he has not asked himself, what does the future hold for me? After this, what happens? So I believe that when we are, or until we are able to have leaders, people like Nelson Mandela, who could think, who could reason, and try to see how everybody can have a part of the just society to which they were born. So I want to believe that we although we think that we are developing, the irony also I try to find is that most or some of the Africans who are supposed to be leaders, some of them have trainings in these developed countries. They see how things happen. They go to the same school that some of these great leaders of the world are. But yet, once they arrive at the climate of Africa, it seems everything evaporates and they come back to their basic normal life, which is a disservice to humanity. So I believe that we need to ask ourselves, what do we do? The young leaders of today are either out for material gains or they're out for pleasure. They're not talking about the concretization of tomorrow. That's why they say leaders, the youth have the leadership of tomorrow. I say, what kind of leadership are you talking about? Because every day we are seeing in a very abysmal situation of the kind of youthful nature that we have. And these are some things. So we have to rethink if we have to, because power, knowledge is power. It's not the gun, okay? And until we begin to look at how we can develop the minds, because if the mind is not properly developed, then right thinking becomes a problem. And when you cannot think right, brute force becomes the order of the day. And no brute force can ever create a society that is just, that is honest, and that's simple. It is all about turmoil and warfare, all about conquering. And you don't need to conquer any human being to live a good life, because we all have space, we all have what it takes to live a decent, if only we can but just say to ourselves, we will do this thing. You can't see children of about 12 years, 10 years, 8 years, holding AK-45. Ask me, what does a child of 10 years understand with AK-45, rather than to say shoot and kill? It doesn't understand.
All right.
There are some things.
Okay, well, some of the opinion that is due to external influence. That is the reason why the racketeering is on. That's why conflict may not stop in African countries. Honorable, what do you feel about that school of thought?
Yes, well, it's not so much in a hurry to jump into that, that's the reason for that. What I see closely is because of the bad leadership. I'm always anchoring on bad leadership. We have about 5 countries that supply Africa guns. 5. Germany is there. And unfortunately, France is there. I'm using the word unfortunate because France has colonies, or some colonies in Africa. So the people that you colonized, you are still going to arm them to kill themselves. Of course, you find Russia there. Russia is there. Ukraine followed. And because Russia is there, China went. Because they are friends. Just like you have because like UK and US, they move together. So, and out of these 5 countries, they still want to get things back from Africa, because Africa is naturally endowed. And 3 major countries that are kind of the largest recipients from these 5 countries, there you have Algeria, you have Morocco, then Egypt. So all these ones are in the northern part of Africa. So it's from there started cascading down to West Africa, Central African Republic, all around. So because they don't have what it takes to have a good government, we created these problems that these 5 nations are started supplying us arms and ammunition. We created them. If we come back home and do what is right, these arms and ammunition will not have a place in our society. And now you find out that these herders and farmers clashes. It's difficult to settle that matter traditionally, which was a common thing before now, whereby you have 2 individuals quarreling. A traditional ruler in that environment can just call them together. But now, as you have it in Nigeria, the herders are armed, heavily armed. So they won't come and listen to you as, in quote, ordinary traditional ruler, when I know I can defend myself with my arms and ammunition. So that's the origin of it. And these small arms and large weapons are in the hands of civilians. About 80% of these arms and ammunition, they are in the hands of 80% of civilians. Just 20% are with government-owned security forces. So now you find it difficult to withdraw it from them. As you try to say it, you want to silence the guns. Let's retrieve those guns from them. You can't retrieve the guns, because something led to the acquisition of the guns. You have to enlighten them. Give them, as Reverend said, give them the right mindset. The leaders will not do that, because if they did, they will rise up against the bad leaders in the society, and the good ones will take over. They will not want that. So what we're having in Africa today is a kind of the leadership challenge that now spread to other parts, what we are seeing now. If you're looking at the remote cause or causes of these conflicts that led to weapon racketeering. If the AU can really rise up to the challenge, interact with the UN will not prevail on these 5 countries that I earlier mentioned: Germany, Russia, France, Ukraine, and China. They can interact with them that please stop supplying us. There should be a resolution. If AU can come on that stand, we don't need all these things anymore. If you really want to help us with funding, help us with amenities. We borrow money from China, and China is still giving us arms and ammunition to kill ourselves. How do we pay back the loans? In other words, they want Africa to be fully indebted to them. You just gave me a loan, they now give me a gun. So how do I pay back? So the problem we have in Africa is peculiar to Africa, because no other continent will want to come in. Of course, we know by now Africa is the poorest continent in the world. And there's a Yoruba saying that the person that was to be set ablaze went inside and rubbed on himself oil, so the fire will catch so easily. Africa is impoverished, and now you're this set of people going to buy guns. It's a very common thing in Africa now to have guns. Even the vigilante we have in Nigeria now, government is not the one providing guns for them. If you are just interested in joining the group, you come with your own gun and ammunition. So you can see it is widespread. So for you to retrieve these guns from them will be very difficult. The easiest way, as I said, is to give them the right education, which African leaders will not do in this nearest possible time.
Wow. Give them the right education. Now, he mentioned some top countries in Africa that do receive these guns in large catchment, talking about Morocco, Egypt, Algeria, and that goes down to them. We heard about guns being carried from as far as Libya, even to Nigeria, so some other parts of African continent. You get to hear him raise the point of France being among the suppliers of weapons to African continent, knowing fully well that some of these countries in West Africa are colonized by France. One way or the other, they're always in turmoil. What do you think should be done about this? Talk about Guinea, Mali, Ivory Coast. The list is just there.
You see, if the foundation be broken, what can the righteous do? I said it earlier that the basic problem for Africa, for instance, is the way and manner the African countries were balkanized. Nations that have no business with other nations are joined together. So there is that mutual distrust from beginning. It's something we have, like we have in Nigeria, when they were doing the amalgamation. The North and the South were not at par in their development. They were not thinking together, but you subdued them together to fulfill what the British people wanted. And that's the same thing they have done in other countries. So you are arming one against the other, because there's a system where the group that is more favorable to you, like if you talk of France, for instance, they didn't just come to colonize, they came to assimilate. They make sure that you became French by nature and by thoughts, forgetting about the roots where you are coming from. And there are certain individuals who does not want that. So there is that conflict. So it will not cease, and these are the issues. But we can only try to eliminate and only try to minimize if the leaders of Africa begin to see themselves first as Africans, and then see themselves as brothers and sisters, rather than see themselves as enemies. You know, once you don't see the next person as your friend, the next person is to eliminate. And that's why we have to begin to look at how do we, as Africans, see ourselves as one people. It's not like you have the Asians, for instance. No matter how we're talking about, the Asians see themselves as one big family. You know, and that's why you don't find the kind of war we're talking about in Africa, in Asia. You don't find it. They're talking about how to develop themselves, how to give themselves. So it's also, like I said, it also hands on bad leadership. Nations rise and fall on leadership. Until we get the kind of leader, like I said, if we have gotten some kind of leaders across Africa like Nelson Mandela, we'll be having less of conflict. We'll be having less of war. Because once you do not have thinking men and women whose priority is to lift the next person up, then war will not cease. Don't also forget that those who manufacture weapons do not manufacture them as household items for decoration. They manufacture them for them to have resources. And you don't manufacture a gun as a decoration. You want to use it to fight. You want to use it to tempt. Is it very active? That's how they improve on their guns. And so Africa has become the theater for them to see whether their gun is effective or not. And stupidly, like I said, during slavery, they were accepting ordinary bottle of wine.
Mirror.
Salt. So for a human being, a human life. So that's the way they think. So the Africans have not recognized the importance of human life. They think that once you are a leader, only your life is important. But don't forget that you cannot be a king without subjects. And as a king, your life depends on the activity and the goodness of the subjects for your kingdom to reign. So the thinking has not come to that point, and that's where we look at issues. So I believe that we need to reorient ourselves. How do we do it? You see, we have to do it one after the other. I keep telling myself these days, I don't blame leaders too much. I blame we followers, because if I and you think of how to progress ourselves, and we agree that we must work together, the third man will not come and give us gun to kill ourselves. We will say no, because that does not favor us. So until we begin to think of how we can manage ourselves, most of the conflict we have in Africa, in Nigeria, for instance, are land issues. You hear communities killing communities for land that you met, the land you will leave. But they are killing themselves to say, I own this land. You didn't bring the land. But we can survive together and make that land profitable. The herders and farmers today, there's no more farming. Food is getting very scarce. Everything is becoming, because we have not told ourselves that we ought to one to another, that without me you can't live, or without you I can't live.
All right, thank you so much, Reverend. We want to go for a break. When we return, we will continue with this discussion, talking about conflicts in Africa, the impact of weapon racketeering. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. Thank you so much for staying tuned to this channel. If you just joined us, this is Africa Discourse with Wilson on Marshall. We are taking a look at conflicts in Africa, the impact of weapon racketeering. I have two amiable gentlemen here with me in the studio, been sharing their thoughts and opinion on this particular discussion. Honorable Frank,
yes,
you talked about EU, talking to UN or even EU to talk to these countries to stop supplying weapons to Africa for them to use in combat or to hurt or kill themselves. Do you see AU having the capability or the capacity, even the strength, to warn these countries to stop supplying weapons to Africa as a continent?
Well, it's just advisory. I was strong in my opinion as I made that statement, but when Reverend said those creating problems for us are the ones sitting down to attempt to solve it, they will never solve it. But I still want to stand on the point that when the right thing is to be done, let them meet up with UN. And as you added, EU, that these countries, Russia, Germany, China, Ukraine, and France, please, if you have a peaceful coexistence mentality in your own neighborhood, why don't you extend that to Africa? They are fighting. The reason they are fighting is because of the supplies you make. So if that accusation comes up, maybe a peaceful accusation, if there's anything like that, that you are the reason why they are fighting. Then any of these five countries say, how do you mean? That the gun they just used, the AK-47, but you supplied it. So if you didn't supply it, then they would have had other ways to resolve their problems. Someone that would have...
Maybe they'll fall back to cutlass, matches, and the rest.
Which is even bearable. It's not bearable. Like, somebody's going to come with a cutlass, how many would be able to kill? Yeah. But one person can just hold an AK-47 and bring down a lot of persons. So a lot of traditional institutions have been crippled because of the inflow of these small arms and light weapons. And a matter that would have been resolved so easily between a herder and a farmer, which they would have come to the palace of the chief or the king. Now, the next thing you hear on TV and radio, about 50 persons were killed. Oh, what happened? He said, no. He killed one of my cows, one cow. Then lives are gone. So what I'm trying to say in essence is the EU is not pragmatic enough. They are just doing to show to the world that they are making the right attempt. And those attempts they are putting on the table are not the attempts that could be crystallized in Africa. Those attempts cannot be used in Africa. They want to go ahead with global best practices, not knowing that Africa is peculiar. It's not everything you import you use the way it is. And they should have looked at sins that caused the conflict. They are complaining about unemployment. Give them employment. Create jobs for them. When you create jobs for them, I haven't talked for a while now. You will leave this studio tired. You can't think of any evil thing to do. If the youths are gainfully employed, it's almost impossible for them to now wake up at night to go into robbery. So the EU is another challenge we're having, aside from the leaders of Africa. The EU as a body has not done the right thing towards ensuring that the racketeering of weapons is put to an end. I blame it on EU at this point.
Wow. All right. Some are saying,
AU.
Now, some are saying gun racketeering is a good, lucrative, sumptuous business. Now, you stopping it is almost impossible, especially when they discover that Africa is viable for such transaction. How do you view this thought?
Just like you said, most of the time it is bad things that becomes more popular and more immediate rewarding. You know, I keep saying, I do not blame I will blame the leader, but I will not blame the EU, for instance, for Nigeria's problem. When Nigerian leaders can't sit together to discuss their problem. Nobody from outside can solve your problem from within. You need to solve it from within. EU cannot discuss African problems without the African leaders. We have blocks, and these are the problem with Africans. The Central, the East African, for instance, do not view things the way the West Africans view it. Again, I keep saying, it goes back to the foundation of these countries. You will know, as a lecturer, the leader I learned from when I did linguistics, he said, every man thinks in the language of his original birth. The language that you were brought up with is the language of your thinking. That's why...
If you person grew up there.
Yes, the Igbo man will think differently from the Yoruba man. So, and until they are able to come together in an agreement, which is something that has to do with a rethinking, it's difficult. So, if in Nigeria we can't even talk together, is it the AU that will now bring a solution to us? It will not. So we need to sit down and ask ourselves this question. That's why people are talking of restructuring. Restructuring in Nigeria has different language and meaning.
Yeah.
You know that. So if we cannot even understand the meaning of restructuring first, how do you do the work? You can't. So but the unfortunate thing that most of those who are not even agreeing have understanding of what it is, but they don't agree because it does not serve their personal interest. We need to leave ourselves out of issues and discuss issues dispassionately on behalf of everybody. So we need to do that. I keep referring to Nelson Mandela. In his life, he looked out of himself and looked at how the nation of South Africa, whether white or black, can live together as Africans. And that's what we need. An American will think first of America before he thinks of the state he came from. In Nigeria, for instance, you're going to think of the nativity of your mother before you think of whether there is even Nigeria. People don't even think whether there is Nigeria now. So, and these are things. You look at the debate in National Assembly. When the person from the north is speaking, the man from the south thinks there is an enemy. How do you now have a consensus in this building? The same thing with Africa. I said every leader in Africa, go and look at it, they are put there by men with guns, and that we call political jobless.
Political jobless.
Thugs. They are armed. And if you came, the Bible says, he that live by the gun will die by the gun. If you came by the gun, you will sustain yourself by the gun. And that's what is happening. So we need to, you can't go to UK, for instance, and you're talking of having a party primary and you begin to shoot gun without happening. It doesn't happen. You discuss, you talk of ideas. But in Africa, you use gun to settle matter. So how do we come out from here? We need to change our mentality, and until your life changes, because out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So it is what we have in our hearts. There's a lot of hatred. There's a lot of hypocrisy. Go to our borders and see what immigration people do. You allow people to import guns, even on the road. Don't just go on the roads. Look at the roadblocks and all. Once you give money, nobody look at what's in your boot. My thought is that we should begin to appreciate that management is what makes these things easy. And nobody can have a management idea if you don't have knowledge and thought. You know, because conflict, we have seen that guns have not enabled us to progress. And once you see something happening against what you are thinking, you should retreat and try to rethink. So I want us to be able to bring up leaders who can manage lives, who can manage ideas, and then let the things, you are not a Lord that knows everything, which again African leaders try to assume they know everything. There are many persons in Africa with brilliant ideas, with brilliant thoughts that can help to advance this country. And when we see them go outside of this country, they make a lot of tremendous help to other nations. Why is it difficult for us to employ and deploy the abundant human resources that God has given to us to deploy our natural resources in a manner that we can get our results?
Good question. Good question. Now let's take a look at the lucrative aspect of weapon racketeering. Well, I said, if you know the cost of one AK-47, you want to leave the business. One was caught in Nigeria, was asked the reason why he was involved in it. He said, look, the money there is amazing. If you go to other countries also, you're going to see supply and demand of this. We're talking about either exchange for crude oil or exchange for diamond, exchange for any resources you have in your country. I mean, is this because of the nature of the business or the money involved? Is that the reason why it's getting almost uncontrollable in Africa?
Yes, it is the money involved in the first place, and is a way to shield people that have a low class wanting to exhibit or to showcase what they are made of, which ordinarily, with their ordinary clear eyes, they'll be able to do. It's like somebody trying to drink and will get drunk to make some statements, or better still, take a sip and you just begin to think he's drunk. That's why he's saying what he's saying. So it's a type of business. The AK-47 itself is expensive, and there is this homemade artisanal weapons. People can make AK-47 in Nigeria already. They showed one on TV some weeks ago. So there is money in it, because people want to express themselves. People that have been kind of marginalized, and they try to speak up, they wouldn't listen to them, they'll take up to arms. If by destroying one or two things, you now call them for a round table talk, and that which would have been better if you had called them without laying hands on arms. So there is a failure of government that people are not taking advantage of. Just like each time you have fear scarcity in the society, is an avenue for people to make brisk business through black marketeering and all that. So it's a failure on the part of government and on the part of the citizens not having that love, care for the next person. A commodity you bought for 1,000 naira, because there's scarcity for a while, you now say it's now 10,000 naira. So you're going to further impoverish people around you, and the economy will not be boosted, unfortunately. because the ability to buy will not be reduced because your money, there's so little, you cannot afford so much anymore. So there's business in weaponry. There's arms business, but this is the kind of business we should be doing now. The business Africa should be doing now is to create an enabling environment for us to thrive. For every citizen, no matter how young or old you'll be in Africa and you'll be happy with it. We have a lot of Africans in the diaspora. They are doing so well. Why are they doing that? Because they have the platform to perform. But now you can perform, there's no platform, and before you know what is happening, you are incarcerated for one reason or the other, either fiscally or financially. You're able to meet up with your demands. So that's why at a point in Africa now, people are now living en masse to other continents of the world, because the brains that would have made Africa to be a better continent are living in droves. And you can stop them. If you want to stop them, provide things for them, the environment for them to perform. But now we're going to have more problems because people are leaving Africa. Nobody wants to die untimely. Nobody wants to die in poverty. Nobody wants to die for no good reason. So it still boils down on the leadership if they are willing and they are ready to make Africa work again.
Boils down on leadership. Quite interesting. Gentlemen, you have 2 minutes each to summarize your point. How do you think Africa can get out of this, if they will ever get out of this situation?
Well, there is nothing that is impossible, and there's nothing that cannot be repaired. If there's the willingness, if there is the resolve to make a better day, and if we decide to have the kind of leaders that will promote our environment, because leadership is the issue that affects development. We must learn to understand that we don't have two lives. A wasted life cannot be made to stand to develop a place. Guns were supposed to be used to defend and give the citizens peaceful life. It was not meant for destruction. So let us not misuse what the materials were made for, but let us use them in a manner that will be profitable.
Well, thank you so much, Reverend. Honorable, your last line.
Yes, they should, as a matter of urgency, look into the immediate and remote causes of these various conflicts. No matter what to stop arms deal and all that, it won't work. Reasons for the conflict should be looked into. Thank you.
To be looked into. We keep looking into it to see how we can really solve this case. But in Africa right now, weapon racketeering is one of the top business because you have conflicts here and there. North, south, east, west. You get to see people agitating, you get to see people fighting, you get to see coup, you get to see militants trying to liberate themselves, so to speak. You get to hear about terrorists, you get to hear about bandits, you get to hear about kidnappers. And they do all this using weapons. And the top 5 countries, you know, a finger for supplying weapons to Africa. You heard their names here. We'll talk about France, talk about Russia, we'll talk about China. We also talk about so many other countries, yes, trying to go behind, you know, the door, behind the scene to supply weapons. And of course, it is not really cool for Africa as a continent, but what do you think African leaders can really do about this? Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on today's show. I appreciate a wonderful analysis. See you tomorrow, God willing, on International Forum. Bye for now.